There comes a moment when life feels good. Not exciting, not dramatic, just quietly sufficient. And instead of relief, something unexpected appears. Discomfort. A subtle question rises in the background. Shouldn't I be moving toward something? Shouldn't I want more by now? Why does this calm feel unfamiliar? Stay with me until the very end, because what you'll understand then is why needing progress was never a sign of growth. It was a sign of tension. Most people believe they want peace, but what they actually want is peace with permission. Peace that comes after achievement. Peace that follows improvement. Peace that is justified by progress. So when peace arrives quietly, without accomplishment as evidence, the nervous system hesitates. Because for a long time, movement meant safety. Progress meant relevance. Striving meant identity. And without striving, a strange question appears. If I'm not improving, who am I now? This is the moment many people unconsciously sabotage, not because they want chaos, but because calm without direction feels disorienting. They start looking for something to fix, a new goal, a new problem, a new version of themselves to pursue. Not because life is lacking, but because progress became emotional regulation. What if the discomfort you feel in calm moments is not boredom, but withdrawal from striving? Think about how often progress has functioned as reassurance. When you were working on yourself, you felt safe. When you were becoming better, you felt oriented. Movement forward meant you were not stuck. But progress was never neutral. It carried pressure. And pressure kept the system alert. So when pressure leaves, the system doesn't immediately relax. It looks for replacement. This is why some people feel more anxious after their life improves. Not because improvement is dangerous, but because the identity built on becoming has nothing to do. Neville Goddard never spoke of endless becoming. He spoke of being. Because becoming postpones peace. Being allows it now. But now is confronting for an identity trained to earn safety. There was a woman, let's call her Helen. Helen had reached a point many people fantasize about. Stable work, calm relationships, financial ease. And yet, she felt restless. Not unhappy, restless. She kept asking herself, what's next? But the question didn't excite her. It agitated her. Until one day she noticed something honest. I don't actually want anything. I just don't know how to stop wanting. That was the beginning of integration. Pause here with me. If you've ever felt uneasy when nothing needed fixing, leave a simple declaration in the comments. Nothing is missing. Then let's continue. For a long time, progress wasn't just something you did. It was how you knew you were okay. If you were moving forward, you felt justified. If you were improving, you felt relevant. If you were growing, you felt safe. Progress wasn't optional. It was emotional insurance. This is why the idea of being enough often sounds abstract, because enough was never something you felt. It was something you approached, a horizon that kept moving. And as long as it stayed ahead, there was motivation, direction, a sense of purpose, but also pressure. What if the need to keep improving was never about growth, but about permission to exist? When worth is tied to progress, stillness feels dangerous. Rest feels suspicious. Contentment feels like a trap. Because if you stop becoming, you fear you'll disappear. Not physically, existentially. So even joy becomes conditional. You enjoy things while planning what's next. You relax while monitoring momentum. You allow yourself peace only if it doesn't last too long. This is not ambition. It is self-surveillance. And self-surveillance keeps the nervous system alert. You are never just here. You are here with evaluation. When identity integrates, this surveillance softens, not because you give up on life, but because you stop using progress to negotiate worth. You realize something quietly radical. You do not need to be improving to be legitimate. That realization doesn't make you stagnant. It makes you present. Presence is what progress tried to imitate. Progress promised relief in the future. Presence delivers relief now. This is where many people panic, because without progress as a compass, they don't know how to orient. They ask, if I'm not becoming something else, what am I doing with my life? But this question is based on a false premise. Life was never meant to be justified. It was meant to be lived. Neville spoke of living from the end. But the end was never endless improvement. The end was sufficiency. The state where nothing is missing. And from that state, movement still happens, but without urgency. You may notice that when worth detaches from progress, your relationship with goals changes. You still have them, but they no longer carry identity weight. A goal becomes a direction, not a verdict. And because it's lighter, you move toward it with less friction. This is the paradox most people never reach. Letting go of the need for progress does not stop growth. It removes distortion. Growth becomes organic, unforced, responsive. You may also notice grief here. Grief for all the years you only felt valuable while striving. That grief doesn't pull you backward. It releases you forward. Because you stop asking life to prove you deserve to be here. This is when calm stops feeling suspicious. You stop asking, should I be doing more? You stop looking for the next thing to fix, optimize, or transcend. You begin to trust the current moment as complete. Not perfect, complete. And completeness is stabilizing. A complete system doesn't rush. It doesn't scramble. It doesn't panic at pauses. It rests inside itself. This is where living well becomes possible without the need for progress. Not because life stops unfolding, but because unfolding no longer needs to justify existence. For most of your life, calm had conditions. You could relax after something was done. You could feel at ease once things were handled. You could slow down if progress was visible. Calm was not a state, it was a reward, and rewards always expire. This is why calm rarely lasted, because it depended on circumstances staying favorable. The moment something shifted, a delay, a doubt, a new responsibility, the nervous system reactivated. The body leaned forward again. Calm disappeared. What if calm never stayed because it was never allowed to exist on its own? A calm that needs a reason is not calm. It's relief, and relief is temporary. It fades as soon as the next demand appears. True calm does not come from things going well. It comes from no longer needing things to go well in order to be at ease. This sounds subtle, but it changes everything. When calm no longer needs justification, you stop bracing for disruption. You stop assuming peace is fragile. You allow life to move without immediately preparing for correction. This is not resignation, it is trust. The body responds immediately to this shift. Muscles soften faster. Breath deepens without instruction. Attention settles instead of scanning. Because the body no longer believes calm must be defended. This is where many people experience a strange mix of relief and vulnerability. Relief because tension drops. Vulnerability because vigilance had become familiar. Without vigilance, there is space. And space can feel unfamiliar at first. But slowly, the nervous system learns something new. Nothing bad happens. Life continues, and you are still here. This is how calm stabilizes, not by force, by repetition without threat. You may notice that your reactions change. You don't rush to fix discomfort. You don't immediately interpret tension as a problem. You let sensations move, and they do, because calm is not the absence of sensation. It is the absence of resistance to sensation. Neville spoke of feeling natural. Calm becomes natural when it is no longer conditional, when it doesn't have to be earned, when it doesn't disappear under observation. This is when your relationship with life changes. You stop asking, "Is this okay?" You start asking, "What is here?" And curiosity replaces anxiety. Calm without reason is the foundation of living well. Not because it makes life perfect, but because it removes the constant need to justify your presence. You don't need to be progressing to deserve peace. You don't need to be fixing anything to rest. You don't need to be on your way somewhere to be allowed to arrive. This is where time shifts again. Moments feel fuller, not longer, fuller, because you are no longer rushing through them toward an imagined resolution. You may still have goals. You may still make plans, but they no longer interrupt calm. They arise from calm, and that changes their quality. This is how living well becomes sustainable. Not because nothing ever challenges you, but because challenge no longer threatens your state. For most of your life, becoming felt necessary. Becoming smarter, becoming calmer, becoming healed, becoming successful. Becoming was how you stayed in motion, and motion felt like safety, because stopping, even briefly, felt like falling behind. But what most people never realize is that becoming quietly postpones life. It places fulfillment just far enough ahead that you are always approaching, never arriving. What if the pressure to become is the very thing preventing you from living well now? The pressure to become does not come from desire. It comes from fear of insufficiency. The fear that who you are right now is not quite acceptable. So you keep upgrading yourself, not joyfully, urgently. And urgency creates tension. This tension is subtle. It hides inside phrases like, "I'm still working on myself. I'm not there yet. I just need a little more time." None of these sound harmful, but over time, they build an identity that is never allowed to settle. When identity integrates, the pressure to become dissolves. Not because you stop evolving, but because evolution no longer needs to justify your existence. You evolve because life moves, not because you are incomplete. This is a profound shift, because without the pressure to become, you stop evaluating every moment. You stop asking whether you are doing enough. You stop treating life as a rehearsal, and rehearsal is exhausting. Life stops being preparation. It becomes participation, not dramatic participation, simple participation. You eat when you're hungry. You rest when you're tired. You move when movement feels right. These were always signs of life, but pressure drowned them out. You may notice now that you enjoy things without narrating them internally. You don't label moments as productive or wasted. You let them be what they are. This is not apathy. It is presence without commentary. Without the pressure to become, comparison loses its grip. Other people's timelines stop feeling relevant. Their milestones no longer threaten you, because your worth is no longer measured against movement. Neville spoke of resting in the assumption. Resting is not stopping. It is ceasing internal argument. And from that rest, action becomes cleaner. You may still grow, but growth feels like expansion, not correction. You're not fixing a flaw, you're expressing life. And expression doesn't rush. This is when joy becomes quieter, less explosive, more durable. It doesn't need celebration to be valid, it sustains itself. Living well without needing progress does not mean rejecting ambition, it means releasing desperation. Ambition without desperation is creative. It builds without strain. You may notice that life feels less dramatic now, less highs, less lows, more steadiness. This steadiness is not dullness, it is capacity. The capacity to hold experience without needing to change it immediately. This is the state many people chase for decades through achievement and miss entirely, because they never stop becoming long enough to live. Here is the truth that was quietly present the entire time. Nothing is missing. Not because everything is perfect, not because life has stopped unfolding, but because the idea that something was missing was never about reality. It was about tension. For years, the feeling of not enough kept you moving. It created urgency, it gave direction, it justified effort. And without it, you may have wondered, if nothing is missing, what moves me now? This question is honest, and the answer is gentle. Life moves you. When nothing is missing, movement does not stop. It changes quality. It becomes responsive instead of compensatory. You act because something calls you, not because something lacks. This is the difference between desire and deficiency. You may notice that wanting changes. You still want things, but wanting no longer feels like tension. It feels like curiosity, like openness, like play. And play is sustainable. This is where many people finally exhale, not dramatically, quietly. The exhale that comes when you realize you don't need to keep checking your progress, checking your growth, checking whether you're doing life right. You stop monitoring yourself, and monitoring was the weight. What if peace was never the reward for progress, but the starting point you skipped? When nothing is missing, time changes again, not because it slows down, but because it stops pressuring you. Moments feel sufficient on their own. You don't rush through them toward an imagined future where you can finally relax. You are already here, and here is enough to rest in. This does not make you passive. It makes you present. Presence is not inactivity. It is unfragmented attention. And unfragmented attention is one of the most powerful states a human can inhabit. Neville spoke of the state fulfilled. The fulfilled state is not excitement, it is settledness. It is the absence of inner argument. It is the feeling that life does not need to prove itself to you. From this place, gratitude appears naturally, not as a practice, as recognition. You notice small things again, not because you're trying to be mindful, but because attention is no longer consumed by becoming. You may also notice that fear loses its leverage. Fear needs lack to operate. It whispers, "What if you don't get there?" But when there is no there to reach, fear softens. It still appears, but it doesn't dominate. This is where living well becomes simple. Not easy, simple. You respond to what is here. You allow life to move through you. You stop organizing existence around future relief. Nothing is missing. And that doesn't close life. It opens it. Because when nothing is missing, everything is available. If this way of living resonates, if something in you recognizes this quiet sufficiency, stay near it. Not by clinging, but by choosing spaces that don't reintroduce urgency unnecessarily, that don't measure worth through progress, that don't confuse movement with meaning. Being here is not about subscribing to an idea, it's about staying close to a way of inhabiting life where peace is allowed without justification. If this space reminds you that nothing needs to be chased, then remaining connected is simply choosing not to forget. Because from this point on, life does not need improvement to be lived well, it needs presence. And presence is already here.